In early 2014, on a grey morning at Harwich Port, ferries roll in and begin unloading their cargo of lorries, cars, and commercial vehicles making the crossing from the Netherlands to England. Among the steady stream of traffic, an ambulance rolls off the ramp. Dutch registration plates, the familiar red cross emblazoned on white paintwork, two men in paramedic uniforms visible through the windscreen. Nothing unusual. Emergency medical transports move between countries every day, ferrying patients to specialist treatment centers, repatriating the sick and injured, conducting legitimate international transfers. The ambulance clears customs without incident and disappears onto the motorway network, heading west toward the Midlands. What you've just witnessed, though you couldn't possibly know it, is one of the most audacious drug smuggling operations in British criminal history. That ambulance isn't carrying a patient, it's carrying death. Hidden behind riveted panels and false floors are hundreds of kilograms of cocaine, heroin, and ecstasy, destined for streets across Essex, London, Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, and Birmingham. The paramedics aren't medical professionals, they're career criminals. And this isn't a one-off gamble. It's trip number 17, or 23, or 38 in a sophisticated logistics operation that will make 45 successful crossings before British and Dutch authorities finally crack the conspiracy. This is the downfall of a fake paramedics drugs empire. The man at the center of this extraordinary criminal enterprise was Olof Schoon, a Dutch national who in the early months of 2014 established what appeared to be a legitimate ambulance company operating from Hoofddorp in the Haarlemmermeer region of the Netherlands, not far from Amsterdam's Schiphol airport. On paper, Schoon's venture looked entirely above board. The business had the proper registrations, the vehicles bore the correct markings, and the paperwork accompanying each journey mimicked the administrative trail that genuine patient transfers generate. Invoices, transfer documentation, even references to receiving hospitals in England such as the Royal London Hospital, all combined to create a facade of medical legitimacy that could withstand the cursory inspection most emergency vehicles receive at border crossings. Schoon wasn't some street-level dealer who'd stumbled into smuggling through desperation or opportunism. Court reporting would later describe him as the central player in the conspiracy, the architect who designed the entire operation from the ground up. He was a married father of 3, which meant he had responsibilities and roots in conventional society, even as he constructed a criminal logistics network that would eventually be valued at up to £1.6 billion in street-level drug sales. The genius of Schoon's scheme lay in its simplicity and its exploitation of a profound psychological blind spot. Ambulances occupy a unique position in public consciousness. They represent emergency, urgency, life-saving intervention. Their vehicles were conditioned to make way for, to let pass without question, to associate with help rather than harm. Border officials processing hundreds of vehicles per shift, customs officers scanning registration databases, police patrols monitoring motorway traffic, all were primed to see an ambulance and think medical emergency rather than criminal enterprise. Schoon understood this instinctively and built his entire operation around weaponizing that trust. The vehicles themselves were meticulously prepared. These weren't hastily adapted vans with drugs stuffed into obvious hiding spots. The ambulances featured professionally constructed concealment compartments built into the interior structure, behind panels, inside cupboards, beneath flooring. The hides could be opened and closed using tools like rivet guns, allowing the compartments to be sealed in a way that would pass visual inspection. Later, forensic examination would recover traces of DNA from these concealment areas, physical evidence that would prove decisive in court. But, in the moment, as customs officers waved the ambulances through ferry terminals at Harwich and Hull, the vehicles appeared exactly what they claimed to be: Dutch emergency medical transports engaged in routine cross-border patient care. Schoon recruited a small team to operate the service. Chief among them was Lennardus Bijlsma, described in subsequent court proceedings as Schoon's right-hand man. Bijlsma's role extended beyond simply driving. Evidence presented at trial linked him directly to the construction and maintenance of the concealment compartments. With his DNA recovered from a rivet gun, the very tool used to fasten the false panels that hid the drugs. When Bijlsma later gave evidence, he described himself as a co-driver who was paid per trip, a characterization that prosecutors dismissed as a significant understatement of his central role in making the smuggling operation function on a practical, mechanical level. The third key figure in the Dutch operation was Richard Engelsbel, who fulfilled the perhaps more straightforward role of driver or driver's mate. During the trial, evidence emerged that Engelsbel had participated in 25 separate trips, a detail that by itself illustrates the repetitive, routinized nature of the conspiracy. This wasn't about making one big score and disappearing. It was about establishing a reliable, repeatable transportation service that could move Class A drugs from the Netherlands into Britain week after week, month after month, with the kind of dependability that wholesale customers in the British organised crime market would pay premium rates to access. The operational pattern that emerged from the investigation reveals careful planning and attention to detail. The ambulances would make the ferry crossing, typically entering Britain through Harwich in Essex or occasionally through Hull in Yorkshire. Once on British soil, the vehicles followed predictable patterns that balanced the need for secrecy with the practical requirements of conducting business. Surveillance footage and investigative work identified that conspirators would sometimes stay at a Holiday Inn Express in Colchester, providing them with a base that was anonymous, transient, and unremarkable. They also used an industrial unit at Moorside Business Park in Colchester as a location where drugs could be safely removed from the concealment compartments without attracting attention. The choice of Colchester made operational sense. The town sits less than 20 miles from Harwich, close enough to the entry point to minimize time on the road with a loaded vehicle, but far enough inland and sufficiently urban to offer the anonymity that comes with light industrial estates and business parks where vans and commercial vehicles are simply part of the landscape. From Colchester, the drugs would be moved onward to meet British-based distributors, typically at locations in the Midlands that provided central access to the conspiracy's national customer base. What made Schoon's operation particularly sophisticated was its business model. This wasn't a single criminal gang importing drugs for its own street-level distribution network. Instead, the ambulance service functioned as a specialist logistics provider serving multiple organized crime groups simultaneously. Evidence recovered during the investigation included a customer list identifying 20 separate criminal outfits that used the ambulance service to bring drugs into Britain. The packages themselves were color-coded with different tapes, a simple but effective system that allowed quick identification and sorting when shipments were broken down for distribution to different customers. In effect, Schoon had created the criminal equivalent of a haulage contractor, offering a premium transportation service to wholesale buyers who valued reliability, security, and the reduced risk that came from using vehicles that attracted minimal law enforcement attention. The scale of the operation is difficult to comprehend without examining the numbers in detail. Investigators were able to establish through surveillance, communications intercepts, and defendant admissions that the ambulance service had made at least 45 trips between the spring of 2014 and mid-June 2015, a period of roughly 14 months. Some accounts describe this as 44 successful deliveries, plus the final trip that ended in interception, though the practical distinction matters little. What matters is that for over a year, these vehicles were moving back and forth across one of the world's busiest maritime borders, carrying enormous quantities of Class A drugs without detection. The nature of smuggling conspiracies means that calculating total quantities with precision is impossible unless every single shipment was intercepted and weighed, which by definition doesn't happen in cases involving extended undetected operations. What investigators could establish with certainty was the load carried on the trip they did intercept, and from that single data point, they could make defensible inferences about the conspiracy's total scale. On the 16th of June 2015, the ambulance that was stopped and searched in Smethwick contained approximately 193 kilograms of cocaine, 74 kilograms of heroin, 2 kilograms of MDMA in crystal form, and 20,000 ecstasy tablets. Summing just the bulk powder and crystal gives roughly 269 kilograms, a figure often rounded in court reporting to about 270 kilos for a single crossing. The potential street value of that one load was estimated at over £38 million. If the ambulance service was moving similar quantities on each trip, and there's no evidence to suggest the intercepted load was exceptional rather than typical, then 45 trips at roughly 270 kilograms per trip yields a total trafficked weight in the region of 12 tons, 12,000 kilograms of Class A drugs. cocaine, heroin, and ecstasy, in quantities sufficient to supply hundreds of thousands of individual users across multiple English cities for months on end. The street value calculations that appeared in court and in official statements estimated the total conspiracy at up to £1.6 billion, whilst the judge at sentencing stated he was sure that drugs with a wholesale value of £300 million had been smuggled during the period covered by the charges. The operation's success in evading detection for so long rested partly on the ambulance disguise and partly on theatrical touches that reinforced the medical cover story. On at least some trips, the conspirators went beyond simply dressing as paramedics and included a staged patient as part of the deception. CCTV footage recovered during the investigation captured one such performance: a supposed patient using crutches to board the ambulance, presenting as someone requiring medical transport. The same footage later showed the individual walking without the crutches, perfectly mobile, the injury revealed as pure theatre. This attention to detail, the willingness to add layers of deception beyond what might strictly be necessary, speaks to Schoon's understanding that successful smuggling isn't just about hiding contraband. It's about constructing a narrative that's psychologically convincing, about giving customs officers and border officials a story they recognize and can quickly categorize as legitimate. A patient on crutches, paramedics in uniform, transfer paperwork referencing a London hospital, these weren't random details. They were carefully chosen elements of a performance designed to trigger the mental shortcut: ambulance equals medical equals wave it through. For over a year, that performance worked flawlessly. Dozens of crossings, thousands of miles driven on British motorways, countless interactions with ferry staff, port officials, even potentially with ordinary police officers conducting routine traffic patrols, and the deception held. The ambulances moved through the British transport network like ghosts, visible but unnoticed, their cargo of death hidden behind the symbol of saving life. The conspiracy began to unravel through the patient, methodical work of the National Crime Agency, working in collaboration with the Dutch National Police. By early June 2015, investigators had identified the ambulance operation and placed it under surveillance. The decision was made not to intercept immediately at the port, where a seizure would yield drugs and vehicles, but potentially allow higher-level organisers to escape or destroy evidence. Instead, officers tracked an ambulance after it entered through Harwich on the 16th of June, following it as it made its way west across country toward the Midlands. The surveillance operation observed the vehicle travel to Smethwick, an industrial area on the western edge of Birmingham, where a rendezvous had been arranged with UK-based associates. As the ambulance met with other conspirators, officers from the National Crime Agency supported by West Midlands Police moved in for the arrests. The scene they encountered matched the cover story almost perfectly. Men in paramedic uniforms, an ambulance that to casual observation looked entirely legitimate, business-like coordination between the Dutch crew and British contacts who'd arrived by car. Only when officers forced entry to the vehicle and began systematically dismantling the interior did the true nature of the operation become clear. Behind the riveted panels, inside the hidden compartments, packed into spaces that should have held medical equipment, were the drugs. Cocaine in quantities measured in tens of kilograms, heroin sufficient to create tens of thousands of street deals, MDMA, and ecstasy tablets destined for nightclubs and festivals across England. The colour-coded packaging made clear this wasn't a single consignment for one gang. This was a wholesale delivery run, a shipment divided among multiple criminal customers, each identified by the tape colour wrapped around their parcels. The arrests at Smethwick were only the beginning. The investigation's tentacles spread in two directions: back to the Netherlands to dismantle Schoon's ambulance company and identify everyone involved in the logistics operation, and deeper into England to map the distribution network that received and redistributed the drugs after they entered the country. The Dutch prosecution moved first. Schoon, Bijlsma and Engelsbel were charged along with a fourth man, Dennis Vogelaar, who was ultimately acquitted. The case came to trial in late 2015, with convictions announced in November and sentencing following in December at Birmingham Crown Court. The sentences reflected both the enormous scale of the conspiracy and the sophisticated, premeditated nature of the offending. Olof Schoon, as the central organiser who'd established the bogus ambulance firm and orchestrated the entire operation, received 24 years imprisonment. Leonidas Bijlsma, whose direct involvement in constructing the concealment compartments and hands-on role in the smuggling runs made him indispensable to the conspiracy's practical functioning, received an even longer term of 28 years. Richard Engelsbell, despite having participated in 25 trips and therefore being deeply embedded in the operation, received 18 years, a sentence that, while substantial, was lighter than his co-defendants, perhaps reflecting a more limited organizational role. The judge's sentencing remarks emphasized the meticulously planned nature of the conspiracy, its high sophistication, and the breach of public trust inherent in using emergency medical vehicles as cover for drug trafficking. The prosecutors had argued successfully that this was top-level organized crime logistics, a professional transportation service operated with business-like efficiency over an extended period. The sentences handed down sent an unambiguous message about how seriously British courts treat large-scale drug importation conspiracies, particularly those exhibiting such calculated planning and abuse of symbols the public associates with care and rescue. The UK-side prosecution followed in 2016, focusing on the British distribution network that collected drugs from the ambulances and moved them onward to street-level dealers and regional crime groups. The central figure in the UK operation was James Gibson, described in National Crime Agency statements as the leader of the distribution network with direct links to Schoon's Dutch ambulance group. Gibson's role was to coordinate the British end of the operation, ensuring that when ambulances arrived and drugs were unloaded, there were couriers ready to collect specific consignments and transport them to their final destinations across England. The investigation into Gibson's network uncovered the operational realities of large-scale drug distribution. Encrypted communications between conspirators were intercepted and decoded, revealing the planning and coordination behind each shipment. Physical surveillance identified the couriers and their methods. In one particularly significant discovery, officers raided a courier's home and found boxed Class A drugs stored ready for distribution, approximately 53 kilograms of cocaine and 5 kilograms of heroin, evidence of the volume of product moving through the network even beyond the ambulance loads themselves. The UK defendants who appeared alongside Gibson had fulfilled various roles in the distribution conspiracy. Some were described as trusted couriers, individuals who could be relied upon to collect valuable loads and deliver them without theft or compromise. Others acted as collectors who met the ambulances at rendezvous points and supervised the unloading. One was characterized as Gibson's right-hand man, a lieutenant who helped coordinate the logistics of moving drugs from Colchester or Smethwick onward to customers in cities as far apart as Manchester, Liverpool, Leeds, and London. The distribution network's geographic reach matched the customer list recovered during the investigation, confirming that Schoon's ambulance service was genuinely operating at a national level, supplying organized crime groups across multiple police force areas. In July 2016, 6 UK-based defendants appeared for sentencing at Birmingham Crown Court, having pleaded guilty after being confronted with the evidence assembled against them. The sentences again reflected both individual culpability and the conspiracy's overall seriousness. James Gibson, as the network's organizer and the linchpin connecting the Dutch importation operation to British distribution, received 20 years imprisonment. Raymond de Silva received 16 years. Petrit Castrati was sentenced to approximately 17.5 years. Darren Owen and Jonathan Floyd each received 15 years, with Floyd's sentence also reflecting an additional matter of driving whilst disqualified. Richard Clark received 11 years. The sentencing judge, Francis Laird, returned to the themes established in the earlier Dutch trial, emphasizing the sophisticated, meticulously planned nature of the conspiracy and the staggering quantity of drugs involved. His statement that he was sure drugs with a wholesale value of £300 million had been smuggled in ambulances during the charge period gave official judicial recognition to the operation's industrial scale. These weren't street dealers caught with a few raps in their pockets. These were logistics professionals who'd helped facilitate one of the largest drug importation conspiracies in modern British criminal history, moving multi-kilogram loads with the regularity of a legitimate haulage firm. The combined sentences handed down across both trials totaled well over a century of imprisonment, a collective punishment reflecting the harm caused and the calculated, sustained nature of the offending. What makes the ambulance conspiracy particularly troubling from a law enforcement perspective is the question it raises about undetected smuggling. The 45 trips that investigators could evidence represented only what they could prove through surveillance, communications intercepts, defendant admissions, and forensic evidence. The conspirators may have made additional runs before surveillance began, or there may have been trial runs or smaller shipments during the operation's establishment phase that left no documentary trail. More broadly, the success of Schoon's method for over a year demonstrates a persistent vulnerability in border security, the difficulty of systematically searching vehicles that carry symbols of urgency and emergency. An ambulance delayed at customs for thorough inspection potentially means a patient not receiving timely care. That humanitarian concern creates pressure to process emergency vehicles quickly, a pressure that sophisticated criminals can exploit. Since the ambulance conspiracy was dismantled, official assessments from the National Crime Agency and international bodies have acknowledged the continuing evolution of concealment techniques. The NCA's 2023 to 2024 annual report specifically describes organized crime groups as increasingly using sophisticated concealments to move goods, including drugs, across borders, and notes operational efforts to train frontline staff to recognize concealment indicators. A 2024 Home Office consultation document lists vehicle concealments among the tools connected to serious organized crime, reflecting government concern about the ongoing adaptation of smuggling methods. The World Customs Organization's 2025 report on maritime cargo notes pervasive criminal infiltration of supply chains and cautions that even comprehensive seizure data doesn't provide a complete picture of global illicit flows. These assessments, from authoritative national and international sources, confirm what the ambulance case demonstrates. Successful smuggling conspiracies like Schoon's aren't historical curiosities, they're indicators of persistent, evolving threats. Olof Schoon is currently serving his 24-year sentence in a British prison. By the time he's eligible for release, assuming he serves the typical portion of the sentence before parole consideration, he'll be an old man, his children grown, the business he built in Hoofddorp long since dismantled and erased. Lennardus Bijlsma faces an even longer period of incarceration, his 28-year term among the longest ever imposed for drug smuggling in a British court. Richard Engelsbell, James Gibson, and the other convicted conspirators are similarly locked away, their freedom sacrificed for the £300 million wholesale, £1.6 billion street value that investigators calculated their operation generated. The drugs they smuggled into Britain during those 45 trips, 12 tons of cocaine, heroin, and ecstasy, give or take, have long since been consumed, injected, swallowed, snorted. The human cost, measured in addiction, in family breakdown, in crime committed to fund dependency, in overdoses and deaths, is incalculable and will never appear in any court document or sentencing remark. What appeared at Harwich Port as a legitimate ambulance on a humanitarian mission was in reality a vector of harm, a transportation system moving poison under the disguise of care, exploiting the trust we place in emergency services to facilitate one of the largest drug smuggling operations ever uncovered on British soil. For 14 months, that deception worked perfectly. 45 crossings without detection, before patient police work and international collaboration finally exposed Schoon's audacious fraud. What do you think of the fake paramedics conspiracy? Was Olof Schoon a criminal genius or simply lucky to exploit an obvious vulnerability for as long as he did? Please let us know in the comments section, and in the meantime, thank you very much for watching.